Okay, hey everybody, welcome back. As it turns out, I did actually play another very interesting game, again in the King's Indian. So, kind of to follow up with the last game analysis that I did, I'm going to analyze this game that I played just now. So, so my opponent is another kind of master strength player. He's an FM, I think, rated almost 2400 USCF, so pretty close to my level. And I was black this game. This is the last round of the tournament. Tournament had not been going too well for me, but so kind of towards the end, I was just trying to experiment with different openings and see what I could learn. Um, and okay, as it turns out, like probably my two best games this tournament were in the King's Indian, where I was basically making things up on the spot. So okay, so yeah, this game was also very interesting. Let's just dive right in. So my opponent starts with c4. Knight f6, knight c3, g6, and he plays e4, this move order. So a lot of times I actually have played this myself with white. The point is, instead of playing kind of the more traditional d4, which would allow a Grunfeld if black wanted to play Grunfeld, white plays e4 right away to just cut out the Grunfeld entirely. So now black pretty much has to go into the main line of a King's Indian. There are I think e5 is kind of a sideline here, although it's not considered to be very good. So at this point, basically, yeah, white is forcing a King's Indian. Black has nothing better than to just kind of play into the main line of that. But okay, of course, I was planning to play King's Indian anyway, so this is not really a concern to me. And okay, I played d6, d4, bishop g7, and okay, here we are. We have our mainline position. This is actually kind of the nice thing I'm realizing about the King's Indian is that it doesn't really matter what move order white chooses. You kind of just you have your opening that you're going to play. Like you're not worried about getting tricked into a move order where white forces you to play King's Indian. Like let's say you're a Grunfeld player here, you either have to be willing to play King's Indian or you have to be willing to play this kind of cagey sideline with e5, or you have to learn something completely different here after after knight c3, you have to play like d5, I think, and kind of you don't get your typical kind of positions that you would after g6, d4, d5 if you're like a traditional Grunfeld player. But if you're a King's Indian player, it doesn't really matter what move order white chooses because you basically, your first like 4 or 5 moves are the same. You're going to do this, you're going to castle, and then you're going to play d6 and probably e5. Or, depending on the variation white chooses, you have a variety of different plans you can execute. So, okay, so yeah, we got this mainline position. And in the last game, I analyzed my opponent played h3, which is the Karpov system. And okay, the idea behind h3 is white is going to very quickly set up this pawn wedge on g4, and even more ambitiously get this knight to g3. The whole point of this strategy is to really lock down this f5 square. Pretty much the main plan for black on the king side here is going to be after e5, d5 to make this break with f5. So this is a kind of very early, white is very early on setting the stages of trying to stop black's plan here. And okay, it also kind of prepares a nice square for the bishop on e3 where it can't get harassed by knight g4. In this game, my opponent plays bishop e2, and after castles, bishop e3. So this is a very similar system. This actually it's become quite popular lately, and I think it's known as the Lesser Averbach variation, kind of an interesting name. I think the traditional Averbach is bishop g5. This is a very old main line, which is not really that popular anymore nowadays. But bishop e3 kind of is a similar idea to the Karpov system, except instead of wasting this move on h3, we're instead going to support the g4 square with a bishop. And actually, white can even consider playing g4 and h4, which, yeah, from the analysis that I did on the previous game that I played here, where my opponent did play h3, kind of the dangerous plan for white, or the danger for black, is that if you kind of fall asleep at the wheel, then white can start to lurch forward with these kingside pawns, play h5, and just kind of squeeze you on the kingside. So this is very ambitious, bishop e2, and then just right away, we're going to try to play g4 and then h4. We're not even going to waste a move on h3. We're going to go to h4 all at once and get this pawn to h5. Now the drawback, of course, is that this knight on g1 is kind of, left behind. It doesn't want to go to f3 because that's going to interfere with white's control over the g4 square. And it's not going to go to h3 anytime. It's not going to go to h3 anytime soon. That's going to block the h pawn. And this knight stays on g1 for a very long time. Like, we'll see when it finally gets developed. It stayed on g1 for a long time. But okay, that's kind of, part of the trade-offs of the system. So yeah, kind of already I was out of book. I was just, improvising. I mean, I know a lot of the main ideas and themes in the King's Indian in general, and I can figure out my own plans in a given position. Um, but okay, I was just trying to have fun and play an interesting kind of experimental opening that I don't usually play. And okay, yeah, we definitely got an interesting game. So I played e5. I didn't really know what to do exactly, so I didn't know what the best plan was for black, so I just played e5, which this is kind of the traditional response, just very classically challenging the center. Like now, black has we've castled, we've developed these pieces. Now it's time to strike back in the center and make sure white just doesn't get to take control over the whole board. Um, but there actually are a lot of different ways black can play this. Another main line is c5, and the point is if white actually tries to take this, then this is a very typical tactical pattern. Black doesn't take the pawn back right away, but instead plays queen a5, unleashing all of these potential threats. And knight takes e4 is a threat because of this pin. So if it were to continue grabbing pawn, if your knight takes e4, black has more than enough counterplay, and white's king is still in the center, not going to be very comfortable here. So that's why white usually plays d5. And now black can play this in kind of Benoni style with e6 and take on d5. You can also play in kind of Benko Gambit style with b5, although it is probably a little bit speculative here. But okay, this is just a different approach to handling the position. And even just to illustrate some other ideas, some grandmasters have been experimenting with this move, knight c6, which actually it looks very provocative because kind of we're asking to get kicked with this move d5. That's actually this reminds me of an Alekhine's defense, where, yeah, actually the main line of this is after d5, knight e5, f4, this knight appears on g4, and black plays bishop d2. But yeah, just to kind of illustrate why this move knight c6 has become also quite popular lately for blacks. I mean, the theory of this system is still very hot and kind of actively developing. But this actually immediately creates a positional threat to play e5. And now after d5, remember white wants to keep the center closed so that he can kind of have time to organize his delicate pawn advance here. If the center opens up, like if black gets to play e5 and take on d4 and open up the e-file, then with this king still on e1, that's not going to be good news. But now after e5, if white wants to play d5, this knight is going to appear on d4, and that's going to really throw a monkey wrench into white's operations. Even if you win a pawn to remove that knight, you're going to have to part with this dark square bishop, and in any case, the e-file will open up. So just for example, a really bad move here would be g4, just kind of naively continuing with what white's plan. Now after e5, black is actually already better. If you play d5, then this knight sinks into d4, and here if white tries to remove it, he's not even winning a pawn here because his knight takes g4 at the end of this variation. Black is close to strategically winning at this point, so really white cannot allow that. And if you don't take this knight, then okay, I'm already threatening to take on e2 and then take on g4. I can further bolster it up with c5. This position is just not really tenable for white with this active knight on d4. So okay, I mean, as I said, the main line is to play d5 and then f4 and just chase this knight around, drop the bishop back to d2. This kind of resembles an Alekhine's defense, and actually the main move here for black is knight h6, believe it or not. I mean, white is actually threatening to win material. After h6 and g4, black is going to end up losing a piece after this g5 fork. So yeah, the main move is knight h6, and kind of the theory continues here. Black will play either e6 or c6 to finally challenge white's center. And this knight has completed a very long journey from b8 to c6, 5g4 and h6, where it looks like a pretty bad piece right now. But actually, one of the points is after e6, if white takes it, then black can take back with the f pawn, and this knight actually recircles to f7, which is not such a bad score. So again, this is a very kind of weird system, kind of very combative approach for black, not really letting white get his usual stuff in. But okay, I didn't know any of this during the game, so I just played the kind of default approach with e5. So okay, of course, he keeps the center closed, d5. And I decided to use some of the knowledge that I learned from analyzing the other game I played, where my opponent chose the Karpov line with h3. And there I learned that you don't really want to waste a tempo with a5 here. a5 is not really necessary. You can just play knight a6 right away. Because after this knight gets to c5, okay, we're going to be gaining time attacking this pawn on e4. And if the knight ever gets kicked from c5 with b4, then that's going to lose another move for white. Because then when we play knight a6, white will have to spend another tempo to guard this pawn on b4. And that extra move gives black some time to make further activity. Play either c6 or bring this knight back and play f5, open up the position. So kind of, here, every tempo really counts. So yeah, a5 I don't think is as good a move, so I played knight a6 instead. And yeah, now my opponent goes for it, g4, knight c5, and f3. So during the game, I actually thought I was having a much improved version of what would be the Karpov system, because in that system, in the other game, my opponent very quickly got a knight to g3, which totally throttled any attempts for me to play f5. Because with this knight on g3, if I ever want to play f5, I'm going to end up having to trade this light square bishop off for the knight, which is just not an exchange that you want to make. This bishop is way too valuable, guarding a lot of important light squares in my position that will become weak, chiefly among them e6. And yeah, so I thought because this knight is still here on g1, the right plan must be to really get this break going with f5, in combination with what I thought was c6 and taking here. Yeah, that was kind of the main line that I had analyzed before. Kind of the improvement from the last game I analyzed was yeah, to play c6 and then play knight e8 and then f5, just kind of very quickly striking back in the center here. And I could do that without having the move a5 in. So yeah, but here it doesn't actually work out that well, because even though white is not going to get the knight to g3, there's actually another very effective way of stopping this f5 break, and that is for white to get this pawn going to h5. Because with this pawn on h5, if black then wants to play f5, then white is going to be able to completely rip open the king side. There's going to be open h file and the open g file, and that's just going to be way too dangerous for black. I mean, this king is not going to feel very comfortable at all there. So kind of in my head, I already was, realizing that, yeah, if white goes for this h4, h5, it's going to be very, very risky to play f5. I still thought it was maybe a playable plan. Yeah, it definitely is not. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens from here. So anyway, I played c6. Yeah, my plan is to take d5, then play knight e8, and then play f5, and then I'm going to be trying to get activity on both sides of the board. And yeah, my opponent plays in kind of the most critical way, h4 and h5. So it's kind of imperative for white, actually, to get this going, because if he just kind of dilly-dallies around and lets me open this up, and lets me play knight e8 and then f5, and he's not really threatening to open up the h-file anymore, then yeah, black's position is going to be fully justified. And this knight e8 and f5 plan will be pretty strong. Like for example, if he plays b4, then after knight a6, okay, this is kind of the main point. You have to lose a tempo to defend this pawn. So like, and this gives black, let's say you play a3. Now this gives black time to open up the position first and play knight e8. And just this one, move of a difference, if white now tries to play h4, yeah, then after f5, h5, things are already, I don't think, so clear, because black could consider maybe playing f4. Black can also consider a lot of times this exchange sacrifice with rook f4. And this is not necessarily super clear. So yeah, I mean, in any case, something like this would at least be an improved version of this f5 break for black. But yeah, my opponent did not go for any of that. He did not play b4. He played, yeah, what I think was a stronger move, h4. So okay, I take on d5. And yeah, now here I keep going with my original plan, but I think I should point out the correct plan here for black. Yeah, not knight e8 and then to play f5. I think the correct approach here for black is not really to do anything on the king side. Just let white play h5. Let white do whatever he wants to do on the king side. We have enough defensive resources not to get just brutally quickly checkmated. Like, it's not going to be that easy for white to accomplish that. And I think the correct approach is to play bishop d7 here. After h5, then this move a5. And the point is actually we're going to play a4, and then put the queen on a5, and then get this b pawn going, b5, b4. So black is getting his counterplay on the queen side. And this is playable. I mean, the engine still prefers white, as it usually does in this opening, but black definitely has his fair share of counterplay. Once again, yeah, it's not going to be that easy for white to checkmate. In fact, a lot of times, white's goal is to just kind of positionally squeeze black and play this move h6 to gain even more space and force this bishop back to h8. But okay, yeah, then black has enough counterplay over here with b5 and b4 to at least make the position playable. Okay, yeah, now what I did, knight e8, I knew this would be risky, but I definitely think I underestimated just how brazen this was. And after h5, I do play f5, and yeah, of course my opponent takes on g6. And now, yeah, the point is that this position just starts opening up, and the king is going to be way too weak on g8. So I definitely didn't really, I don't think I fully appreciated just how serious my difficulties would be in this position. But it is actually complicated enough that white has to be fairly accurate, I think, to actually demonstrate why his position is so good. So yeah, I think either recapture here, either g takes or e takes is good here to open up the position. My opponent took on f5, and kind of at this point we had both been playing fairly quickly. We like had this, we had played these first 14 moves pretty much like not thinking more than a minute on any particular move. And this is kind of the first think for my opponent. I think, yeah, pretty appropriate time to start thinking. So he ended up playing queen c2, which I think, yeah, this is the most natural move to me. It definitely would be what I would play also. And yeah, white's kind of idea is to try and crack open this diagonal. And if this queen, like after queen c2, if this pawn ever takes or plays f4, I mean, this would just be terrible. White invades on h7, and there's no way this is going to end well for black. And the other idea white has here, which is quite dangerous, is to actually take on c5. And after d takes c5, then to play d6. In fact, this is actually something that I was calculating here if white tries to play d6. And the point of this is to open up the light squared diagonal here for this bishop. In fact, bishop c4 check threatens to win material. The rook will have to block, and white can just win the exchange. And yeah, I thought that I was okay here. I can play knight takes d6. And in case of queen b3 check, I can maybe give the pawn back with c4. And then end up with a rook on f7. And I thought this kind of position would be okay for me. I have the two bishops, the position is opened up. In fact, now maybe it's white's king that's going to be in a little bit of hot water because he can't escape and castle this way with my queen here. So yeah, I mean, white I don't think would have to go for that. In fact, yeah, I don't think d6 is really, I don't think bishop takes c5 and d6 just yet really works. But this is a looming idea. Like black has to be aware of this at some point. This can happen. So yeah, he plays queen c2. And yeah, just prepares to castle queenside. I think is a very good move. And I don't really have, I can't really stop this play. Like, I definitely do not want to play moves like b6. That's just, I felt like that was too slow a way to play this position. So I played bishop d7, which, yeah, I think the engine agrees with this move. And now actually I'm threatening rook c8. So like if white were to just kind of nonchalantly castle, then after rook c8, all of a sudden the tables actually very quickly turn. Because now black is actually threatening to gain his own counterplay with b5 on the open c file here. And if now white takes this, we're not going to take with a pawn and allow this same idea of d6 and bishop c4, but black is going to take with a rook. And now actually it's white who needs to be very careful in this kind of position because black is very quick with this queenside play. b5 and b4 is coming in, the queen is coming out to a5, and black definitely has his amount of counterplay. This pawn can advance to e4 at the right moment and open up this bishop, so this is kind of anybody's game at this point. Definitely, white is not the only one with an attack. So that's why here my opponent thought for a little bit, and he ended up taking on c5, which, yeah, I think is an excellent decision. And then he plays d6. So this is like, yeah, this is the main line of the engine. This is definitely the best way to play. It kind of, yeah, in my head, I didn't really see a way to stop this. So yeah, that's why I ended up playing bishop d7, kind of anticipating this to happen, but I didn't really see a good way to prevent it. So I figured, all right, well, it's hopefully not going to be the end of the world. It very nearly is the end of the world for black because this is such a devastating threat. And if we take this pawn, then white will simply castle. And I have a lot of problems here on the d-file. If I move this knight away, then I have to deal with already like bishop b5, for example. And even though like I can barely escape with like queen g5 check, getting out of the pin, and then I can resolve the tension here, my position is kind of dangling by a thread here. I mean, if I try to defend this knight, then that's going to run into knight d5. Anyway, this knight is coming to d5, and white just has a massive amount of compensation for the pawn. Yeah, at the right moment, white will also play f4 probably to just crash everything open on the king's side, get his knight to f3, bring the other rook to g1, and black has to be very, very careful here. So I kind of felt like this just would not be playable. I felt like this would be such a difficult position that I would not really be able to survive. The engine does want to play knight takes d6, and then after castles, it tries to defend with rook f6, just defending this way. And then if knight d5, it's going to do something awkward like rook g6. I did consider this, but I thought it would just be too difficult a position to defend for black. Like, I have to, this knight is just so powerful, and I didn't really see how I would be generating a lot of counterplay. Like, white is not necessarily going to have to take this pawn on c5 and allow me to get the open c file. This king can hide very safely on b1, and I just felt like at the right moment, bishop d3 is going to appear, and this diagonal is just going to be opening up, and my king is going to be having a lot of difficulties here. So that's why, yeah, back here, I kind of, I pretended to know what I was doing here, and I very confidently played this kind of crazy move, b5. which objectively this should make matters worse for black, but at least it presents my opponent with an interesting question. Do you want to take this pawn? And I think, yeah, here my opponent played his next move a little bit too quickly. I think that, like, to me, the most obvious move is to just castle. And yeah, in my head, I did not really have a plan of what I was going to do if white did castle. In the game, he ended up taking this pawn on b5, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, if white just castles and ignores this, I mean, we don't really worry about b4. And the whole point of b5 was to take the c4 square under control and stop bishop c4 check. So like b4 walks right into this. And anyway, the knight is going to be happy to go to d5. Yeah, if white just castles, then black has all the same problems as before, except it's just been maybe even worse with his pawn advancing to b5 as an extra target for white. I mean, maybe now we can consider taking this pawn. And anyway, like here, I probably would have played c4, but now this is very instructive. White now completely opens up the position with f4, and I think black has lost here. I think objectively white's advantage is just decisive, because something is going to open up here. Like if I play e4, then white's going to take this, and this pawn is going to drop next. Once the g file opens up, then it's only going to be a matter of time before like this knight comes in here, this rook comes to g1, and I'm just going to get totally slaughtered here. So yeah, this definitely would have presented the most difficulties for black, probably would have given white a winning position. But instead he very quickly took on b5, which I was very happy to see. And this kind of, this single mistake, like from this position, if white plays the right line, the engine is giving like +3 or +4, some massive advantage. After bishop takes b5, it's actually close to equal now. So, this is why actually another good thing about the King's Indian is even if your position is objectively dubious or bad, the position can be kind of so chaotic and complicated that you still have chances. Like your opponent has to be accurate. And I think here castles is the only good move here for white. If you don't castle right now, then yeah, maybe like black can get away with this. So yeah, so anyway, he takes. And I'm not sure if he missed something here. I'm not sure if he just considered castles and didn't like it. I'm not sure if he just thought, like here, maybe he thought that I couldn't take this pawn because then he castles or brings a rook to d1 and just wins a piece. But actually turns out that I can take the pawn. So I did take on b5, and I had seen this from before. I can take on d6. And now even though white can pin the knight, whichever way he does it, I can tactically actually save a piece. If you play rook d1, I can play queen a5 check and get out of the pin. And if you play knight c3, then whatever, I can defend the knight. And something like this actually would be quite dangerous for white, because now the king is going to be stuck in the center. And if you castle queenside, which is what happened in the game, then I play queen g5 check, and I once again save the piece. In fact, it actually looks like I am winning a piece, but white has his own trick with queen c4 check. Yeah, so this is the way the game went. Yeah, now I thought castles was the most natural move. The engine actually surprisingly wants to take this and be materialistic. Well, maybe not surprising that the engine wants to be materialistic, but the engine wants to do this and leave the king in the center, and for the sake of winning this pawn and opening up the g file. And yeah, I considered this, and I thought that I would get enough counterplay with this move e4, which yeah, the engine agrees with. This is the best move. It's a typical clearance sacrifice. We're opening up a lot of diagonals for our bishop and queen. White cannot take this pawn with a queen, because then rook e8 is going to be winning material. So white has to take this with a pawn. And now actually we've managed to block this diagonal with two of white's pawns. Black is down 2 pawns, but actually after rook b8, I thought this position would just be unclear. The engine gives white like a slight advantage. I think it wants to play rook d1 and then something weird like rook d2 and then park the king on f1 and just kind of hide behind this wall of pawns on f5 and e4. But yeah, I mean, with all the pieces on the back rank, it was kind of hard for me to believe that black would be in serious trouble here. And the engine is not like that optimistic about white's position. It's like a small advantage it's getting. So, okay, I think castles was a much more human decision. So now I play queen g5 check, king b1, I take on b5, queen c4, this is all forced, and he takes on b5, regaining the piece. So here I had my longest think of the game. I thought for about 15 minutes. And I felt like black should be better, but the position is still quite fluid. Like things can change very quickly here. My king on paper is definitely looks a little more exposed than white's king, because at least white has this pawn shield here, and I've moved all the pawns in front of my king. So like if white invades on the 7th rank, or invades on the H file, or uses the open G file somehow after this pawn capture, then it's very easy for my king to get totally toasted here. But at the same time, I have my own avenues for attack against white's king. I have the open B file. This bishop at the right moment can become a total monster if I play E4 and I have a ready-made target on B2. So it's a very tricky position, like with triple major pieces on the board and both kings kind of being in potential danger. Both of us are kind of walking through a minefield here. There are a lot of tactics that, potential tactics that happen later on. So yeah, I thought for a while here, and I ended up taking on G4. And the engine doesn't like what I did, although I think it's playable. The engine actually thinks that the best way for black to play this is queen G6 check, and then to just force a queen trade right away, queen B6. White kind of has to trade the queens, otherwise if you retreat the queen somewhere, then I'll play E4, and this is going to start getting a little bit too dangerous. And then the rook comes to B8, and black gets an initiative very quickly. But yeah, if you take on B6, then this endgame definitely favors black a little bit. I have to admit, I didn't really consider this idea, queen B6, too much. But yeah, definitely I can see that black is better here, but maybe not so easy to win. I mean, I can play E4, but this knight will sit on E2, can maybe go to C3 and shield this diagonal. And okay, it's going to be kind of a long road to maybe converting this if black is able to win. So yeah, I ended up taking the pawn because I was just a little bit too tempted by the prospect of actually being out material here. Because now if we do trade queens, most endgames for black are just going to be straight up winning. If I'm able to play E4 and I have like pressure on the B file and I'm up a pawn in addition to that, that should just be a winning endgame for black. So, but of course, if queens are still on the board, now kind of the king side is completely open. And white can use all of his major pieces to try and attack my king. So okay, now the line that I had calculated here was if white plays knight e2, then I actually can force the queen trade. So I can play queen e4 check. White doesn't want to block with a queen because then I trade queens, but white actually can't avoid it because if I play king a, if you play king a1, then I play this very important move a6. And the whole point of actually starting with this check is so that I take the d3 square under control. And also I take this diagonal under control. So like if I start with a6, then white could play queen d3. Although maybe there I have queen f5. But the real point is white could play queen c6, a very nasty move, and he avoids the queen trade by gaining a tempo on the rook, and then the knight can save itself. And if this knight gets to e4, then white's attack is going to start to be very dangerous here, with the rook coming to g1. So yeah, but my plan was to play queen e4 check, and then a6, and the queen actually has no square to defend the knight except for d3, so you have to go to d3 anyway, and then I trade queens. And I thought this would be very good for black. I play e4, then rook to b8, and the engine agrees. This is very good for black. But my opponent played a much better move. He played knight h3. So this I hadn't really properly considered. But it's actually quite a strong move. Because now anyway, white is going to be threatening to take the g file. And later this knight can go to g5. So from e2, the knight was kind of more passive. Now, yeah, the knight can go to g5. And that can be very serious, displacing my rook. And especially in combination with a queen arriving in this diagonal and a knight on g5, that sets up a lot of potential mating patterns. So it's still like equal. The engine doesn't really see black getting checkmated right away, but I'm definitely walking a very fine line here. So yeah, I kind of realized my initial plan of forcing the queen trade didn't work. So I had another little think here, I thought, for a few more minutes, and then I decided on kind of just playing what seemed like an intuitively good maneuver, queen e4 check and then rook b7. So in these kind of positions, it's really hard to calculate like every single variation because black has a lot of plausible moves. Like you can maybe try queen b4, you could maybe try, I don't know, a6 to dislodge the queen, maybe queen e6 or queen f5 or queen g6 and then bring a queen to b6. You have like so many possible ways to play this. So I just figured, okay, let me try and centralize my queen and then rook b7. This kind of intuitively felt safe to me. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with this. This is fine. So, okay. Now here my opponent actually makes a pretty big mistake. He plays queen a5. We both actually overlooked this tactical shot, which it looks like white is the one who has the serious threat of rook d8 check. When at the end of the day, this queen will arrive here, and then if I start walking up with a king, then knight g5 is going to be crushing. But if I play bishop f8, then the other rook goes to g1 and starts attacking me. But actually, black has an amazing move here. And yeah, because of that, white shouldn't play queen a5. I think he should play, the engine wants to play knight g5, which is kind of interesting, and then just acquiesce to the queen trade. But with his knight on e4, the bishop is never going to get opened up. And white is definitely in no danger here. Maybe even white is a little bit better, because white is one who can focus on attacking my king. Double bricks on the g file, and this knight on e4 is just so powerful. Okay, after queen a5, what we both missed was rook takes b2. Which I had been calculating these ideas, like in case white plays queen takes c5. Then here, actually, I was calculating rook takes b2, which actually wins for black. Or I don't think it wins, but it's at least good enough for a draw. And yeah, the idea is if king takes b2, then queen b7 check. And you can't go to the c file because I play rook c8. You can't go here because of bishop f8, I believe. So you play king a1, but then I play e4 check. And you play rook d4, and then, I'm down a rook, but this guy is stuck in a permanent pin, and I think, like, the engine finds some repetition. To rook c8, the queen has to stay guarding the rook. You can't play queen d5 check, because I just take it, the rook is pinned. So the only square for the queen to actually keep guarding the rook is d6. Then I can keep harassing the queen. I can play queen c6. And this is actually quite an amazing line. The best move for white is rook g1. Hanging the queen, but if I take it, then you play rook takes. You can't take the queen because this bishop is pinning the rook, even though the bishop itself is pinned. But white takes the bishop first, and then takes the queen, and emerges a piece ahead. So after rook g1, and yeah, also here, white cannot take the queen because I take the rook first with check, and then take the queen. And this endgame is very good for black. Good winning chances. We have still a strong bishop, and we have this extra pass pawn. So yeah, after rook g1, okay, now there's really nothing better for black to do than just force a perpetual. You can do these checks, and the game will end in a draw. But yeah, I mean, this is just some of the crazy variations here. With both kings being so exposed, and with 6 major pieces on the board, it's ripe for lots of tactics that can just explode at any moment here. So it plays queen a5, and yeah, here, the other point actually, after rook takes b2, rook d8 check actually loses for white. Because, yeah, we don't take, but we play bishop f8. This is amazing. So, yeah, in my head, like, the reason I rejected rook takes b2 was after rook d8 check, I just thought, well, if I play bishop f8, then, okay, I just kind of rejected this out of hand, because now I thought rook g1 check was coming, and with this bishop no longer on the diagonal, I didn't really think, like, I thought, okay, maybe white can just get away with taking the rook. But I kind of forgot here that this rook is actually hanging, and if you play rook g1 check, I can play rook g2. And my queen, this is why having such a centralized queen is so powerful. This queen actually does double duty, defending both rooks on b7, or on g2 rather, and a8. And actually, like, black is now up 2 pawns, and this king is totally safe. And yeah, later, I mean, we've taken a very important pawn on b2 around white's king. This king is actually in more danger now than black's. So yeah, rook takes b2 would have been probably close to winning for black. I think the best move, the engine just plays rook hg1, kind of saying, okay, you took my pawn, but now I'm making my own threats. But now black can play rook to g, or now black can play rook b6, I think. Rook g2 is also good. Rook b6 is the move that I ended up playing in the game to just block this rook d8 threat, blocking the queen here. And the rook can slide over to g6. So again, the centralized queen is so powerful, guarding a lot of important squares that help me to defend. So yeah, in the game I played rook b6. And unfortunately, this gives white a chance to really take control over the game, which my opponent takes immediately. He instantly plays the best move, rook hg1. And I'm realizing now that I'm in a lot of trouble. I mean, the king, I do have a lot of protection from my pieces around my king. I have a really centralized queen, really powerful queen. This rook can slide over to g6. And the bishop on g7, actually, like, you can think about it as a pawn. It shields the g file. But it's like a special kind of pawn that can also drop back to f8 and shield the back rank. And it can also be an attacking piece and attack the white's king from far away. And kind of the other thing I don't have to worry about is back rank problems. So because I have no pawn shelter for my king, I'll never have to worry about a back rank issue. But actually white's back rank is weak. And actually some of the most incredible tactics that happen later in the game are due to white's weak back rank. So, okay, anyway, rook h1. Yeah, now rook d7 is a pretty serious problem. And also white can just start to reroute his pieces, bring the queen to d2, then over to g5. And yeah, really start to pressure my king. So I played I had my second longest think here. I thought for about 14 minutes, because yeah, I kind of realized that things are a little bit dangerous. I think like if I play queen b7, I think I was worried about queen takes c5. And the problem is queen c4 check is going to be coming in, I believe. And rook takes b2 doesn't like actually create serious enough threats. And yeah, I don't know if this is exactly what I was worried about, but something along these lines. Yeah, I don't remember what the engine was giving here, but yeah, either way, like I have to be really careful. Rook d7 anyway is also a pretty serious threat. So I played rook f8, which, yeah, this is the most resilient move actually. It also forces white to be pretty accurate now to maintain his grip on my position. And yeah, here again, my opponent, thankfully for me, goes wrong. And he plays a very tempting move, queen takes a7. But this is actually a big mistake. Kind of once again, like white has maybe a nearly decisive advantage if he plays the right move, but after queen takes a7, the game is now like back to playable territory for black. So okay, queen takes a7 is very tempting because now in the long run, like now endgames maybe are okay for white because this outside passed pawn on the a file could be quite serious. And also it looks just, I mean, you threaten mate in 1, so it looks very attractive from that point of view. And it also looks like if you play queen b7, there's all sorts of like rook d7 stuff that is going to be, you know, totally dominating the second rank here. But actually, yeah, there are some pretty incredible tactical reasons that make this move not very good. The best move was queen takes c5. And this move is really strong because it forces my queen to stay here and guard these two squares. Because if white is ever able to get a check on this diagonal, then it's going to be curtains for me. If I have to play rook f7, this knight comes into g5. If I go to the h file, then white can anyway play knight g5 and like use the h file. My king has nowhere to hide, pretty much. So yeah, I would have to kind of keep my queen here. I don't know what. I mean, the engine just says white is winning here. Like it doesn't really see any long-term way to defend. My king is basically, there's too many threats. Like rook d7 is coming in, queen e7, rook takes g7 check is probably a threat at this point right now, just to start immediately attacking my king. Knight g5 can come in at any moment. Just to kind of give you one example, if I try to play queen b7 to stop rook d7, to stop this, to at least guard my bishop, then queen c4 check, and if I play king h8, white has this amazing move rook d8. And if I take, the whole point of this is to lure the rook to a square where now white can take control of pretty much everything. I have to turn to h7, now the knight comes in. The attack kind of plays itself. Like queen g8 here, threaten mate. There's other winning moves too. Black is just always kind of one move too slow with his own counterplay. So yeah, queen takes c5 would have been very strong. Okay, instead he plays queen takes a7. And now I play queen b7. So I calculated a couple pretty incredible lines here. At first, it looks like rook takes g7 check is quite a powerful move. Quite powerful, because if I take with a queen, then queen takes, not that, queen takes b6. And white is up a piece. But actually, amazingly, after rook takes g7, king takes g7, it looks like this is going to be bad because of rook d7 check. And if you block, then, well, white simply takes the queen. And even though it looks like, you know, black has some back rank threats here, white plays queen a6 and guards the f1 square, and white is completely winning. Queen and knight versus two rooks, with this king being so exposed. White is completely winning here. But actually, amazingly, after rook d7 check, black plays king h8, and you cannot take the queen because rook f1 check is actually going to be mate on the back rank, and you have no checks. Like you can't play queen a6 anymore because queen a6, I just take it. Yeah, so I mean, you can't take my queen either way. You get mated, rook f1, and if you can't take my queen, you have to somehow get loofed. But then obviously I can trade queens. Black is up the exchange. Black is completely winning here. So yeah, that would have been incredible. Of course, my opponent saw that. He didn't go for it. But he played rook d7, which actually this is the losing move. Kind of the last, I guess you could say, losing move of the game. I had played a couple of my own losing moves, but now my opponent finally makes the decisive mistake that actually does decide the game. And this move loses to one of the most incredible tactics, or one of the most incredible moves I've ever played over the board. Which, yeah, if you want to try and find what black should play here, I'll give you a chance if you want to think about it. His point is if you play queen takes a7, actually white can force a draw with rook takes g7 check, rook g takes g7, not with the other rook, because then the queen comes back to take it. But rook g takes g7, and then white is not going to be able to play checkmate, because if you try to do this, once again the queen comes back. And you have no time to take the queen anyway, because rook f1 is mate. But yeah, white can just keep checking like this, and the game will be a draw. So yeah, queen takes a7 is not the not the right move. The right move is actually rook g6, and yeah, I think this is just probably one of the coolest moves I've ever been able to play over the board. Utilizing the back rank, kind of, my queen and rook are both hanging. In fact, my queen is hanging twice. In fact, my queen is also X-ray defending my bishop. Like, if white takes this, I can take this with my queen. So like she's actually defending the king side for me, like through the rook, and it's just an incredible position with this triple set of major pieces on the 7th rank. And white has actually lost. White cannot take the queen, obviously, because you get mated on the back rank. Taking the rook is no different. You can't take this either, though, because of rook f1 mate. And I'm anyway threatening. Rook takes g1 check and then rook f1 mate. And you can't even like make Luft somehow, because then I will trade queens, then I'll take this, and then I'll end up winning your knight at the end of the variation. So white like has no way to deal with this. He has to move the rook away, so my opponent here thought for, he took his second longest link of the game here, he thought for about 17 minutes, I think, as he kind of realized how abruptly the tables have turned. And he plays rook to d1. I think rook e1 would have been a little more resilient, but we'll see why later. So he plays rook gd1. And actually, the reason why this is winning is actually, it's not just as simple as like we're, mating you on the back rank by force or anything. That's not really it. The point is now I can trade queens. Now there's no rook takes g7 intermezzo. And the whole point is actually this knight on h3 is such a terrible piece that this endgame is winning for black. It's equal material, but my pieces are all going to be so dominating, and my king is going to be completely safe. Like this bishop defended by the rook, there's nothing white can ever do, even if you double on the 7th rank, which you can't do while your back rank is weak anyway, but even if you could, you're not making any threats, because this bishop is always defended. And the bishop is going to start attacking white's king after I play e4, and this knight just doesn't participate. If it could get to like e4 or c4, or actually some reasonable square, then yeah, white would definitely be in the game. But because it's so bad, that is so bad here, white is lost. So yeah, like for example, he can't play rook a3 here, trying to preserve the knight's position on h3 because I'll simply take. And not e4 check right away, because that allows the king to escape, but this killer move, rook b8. And there's no defense to e4 check, and it's going to be actually mate. So yeah, and you can't defend the knight this way either, because I can just take it. You have the same back rank problem, rook f1. So unfortunately, knight g1 is forced. Now I play another very strong move, rook f2, not allowing the knight to go to e2. Yeah, here it would have been a little bit better had this rook already been on e1, because then at least maybe white could make some Luft and then be threatening to activate the knight in e2. Although even there, rook e3 would pin it in response. But yeah, anyway, black's position is winning. My next step is to double on the 7th rank, play e4, and start attacking the b2 pawn. White has no time to really organize any kind of counterplay with this guy, because if you play a4 actually, then I play e4, and I now can play rook a3 check thanks to this pin. In fact, I'm threatening mate. I'm threatening rook a3 check, and then rook takes b2, and then rook a1. So yeah, my opponent played the best defense. He checked and played rook a3 to at least force off one of my attacking pieces. But yeah, this endgame is winning. I take e4 check, queen b1, e3. This is why it would have been a little bit better for the rook to already be on e1, because now at least you're already ready to blockade this pawn. So he played rook e1 here, and he's ready to play knight e2 now and blockade the guy. But yeah, here I can play this, play rook takes a2, and you can't take this because I'm going to go here and win the knight. And I should point out that this does not work because of king b1. It's kind of important. And now if I take this, I'm not sure if this is winning. No, this is not winning, because yeah, the king gets to c4, blocks this off, and then the pawn starts moving. So like I actually have to be careful here not to lose. I have to probably bring my bishop back to d2, so make sure I take control over the a5 square, so I can stop the pawn. But okay, obviously yeah, we can play rook a1 check and take the knight instead. That's going to be much stronger. But yeah, anyway, I'm threatening rook a1, which actually wins the rook, because the king can't go to d2. So he plays knight f3, defending his rook, and now I play bishop d4, covering this pawn, And okay, after a few more moves, he threw in the towel, play e2. Rook to g4, he tries this, but now I can take on a3, threatening rook takes knight, which is, even if you defend it, I can take it anyway. Or here I have bishop e3 check. I mean, it's all winning. So knight e1, bishop c3, now threatening rook a1 to take this. Gives me a few checks, and yeah, here he resigned. So yeah, definitely like the King's Indian, I'm starting to appreciate a lot of things about the opening. Kind of one thing that I do like about it is the move order. You don't have to worry about any move order tricks, because like if white wants to, let's say you're a Grunfeld player and your main line against d4 is to play the Grunfeld like this with d5, right? Well, you have to learn a whole new system if white plays with c4 or knight c3 first. Because now if you try to play g6 and you're hoping for d4, d5, and you're back in your Grunfeld territory, well, white can play e4 instead, and now you're not playing your Grunfeld anymore. So like here, you'd have to learn a whole new line with d5. Whereas in the King's Indian, you don't really care what white does. Like white can start with, d4, c4. White can start with any move order he wants, and all the same, like black's opening setup is what it is. We're just going to do this and castle, and we don't really care. We don't really care what move order you're going to do. If you trick us into playing a King's Indian, then congratulations, you tricked us into playing the opening we were going to play anyway. So yeah, now the other thing, I mean, the reason why the King's Indian is not so popular at like the elite levels, there are some super GMs who do play it on occasion, but it is like theoretically considered to be a little bit dubious. And although that doesn't stop some GMs from playing it, some grandmasters do have it as part of their main repertoire, and they play it in serious over the board tournaments. So yeah, I don't think it's such a bad thing. I think definitely I'm not playing against any elite super GM, so I don't have to like worry about all of their super advanced theory. Kind of for my level, it's definitely, I think, an appropriate opening to play. It's not like refuted or anything. And yeah, I mean, it gives you lots of chances. Even like the way this game went, like the plan that I played was not very good, and I got objectively like a close to lost position. But it was complicated enough that like, I was resourceful enough to play moves like b5 and just mix the game up enough and find like these kind of tactics to save my position, like queen g5 check, to actually keep the game alive. And yeah, I mean, at this point, like now it was anybody's game. White is no longer having a decisive advantage. So yeah, I mean, this King's Indian, actually am considering adding it to my repertoire, like for real, and actually playing it while actually knowing some of the right plans instead of just making it up on the spot. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe that's a decision for a later time. But okay, until then, yeah, I'll see you next time.